Hello, everyone, and good morning. Welcome. Wait. Okay, we're ready to start. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here at the opening event of the Spanish Pavilion at the COP30 here in Brazil. I'm Ángel Pérez, Head of International Affairs and Climate Action at the Spanish Youth Council, the organization that represents Spanish youth and Spanish organizations and organized youth before governments, before institutional representatives, and global fora. First of all, we would like to thank the Ministry of Ecological Transition and Demographic Challenge and Fundación Biodiversidad for offering us the opportunity and the space for dialogue, reflection, engagement, and contributions to the key topics to be tackled here at COP, positioning young people and youth organizations as an essential political actor in the response to the climate emergency. Just last week, the United Nations, a few days before the start of COP30 in Brazil, and exactly on the 10th anniversary of the entry into force of the Paris Agreement, the United Nations called for maximum ambition and announced that before 2030, emissions must be reduced by 42% to avoid greater impacts and to limit global warming to a maximum of 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. And this is becoming increasingly difficult when we see that the main greenhouse gas emitting countries, oil producers, and the biggest economies are not contributing to these global efforts on mitigation, just transition, adaptation, and climate finance. The scientific evidence is clear. The climate crisis is the greatest challenge of our generation. Globally, the year 2024 was the warmest on record. The heat content of the oceans and sea level reached record levels, and greenhouse gas concentrations are the highest in 800,000 years. The climate crisis is not a future threat, but a present reality with already devastating impacts. Furthermore, Spain is especially vulnerable. The 21st century has seen the highest frequency of severe droughts in 150 years, and heat waves have increased in frequency, duration, and intensity. Extreme phenomena such as heavy rainfall, forest fires, far from being isolated events, are becoming more and more common, impacting not only our quality of life, but also our health and well-being, food security, water availability, and economic stability. But what should challenge us the most at this conference and this opening event, first and foremost, is how this evidence translates into the lives of young people. For those of us who are young, the climate crisis is not an abstract concept, but an everyday experience. In every report, every temperature record, every warmer year are not just numbers. They are life projects that are postponed because the future is becoming more and more unstable. We need real commitments so that the rights recognized by the United Nations framework principles on human rights and the environment to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, and our rights to health, work, and housing are effective for our generation. Young people are also bearing the cost and doing a double burden. We suffer the consequences of decisions made without having a voice and a vote on them, and at the same time, we are assuming the responsibility of demanding the necessary structural challenges to guarantee the well-being of future generations. In addition to being a vulnerable group affected by the climate crisis, young people have also proven to be drivers of change and agents of transformation. Youth movements have demonstrated a capacity for organization, advocacy, and proposal. Together with many other climate organizations, we have built roadmaps with concrete and viable measures on mitigation, adaptation, just transition, climate finance, health, biodiversity, rural areas, ecofeminism, and political participation. On the other hand, from the Spanish Youth Council, we are committed to climate action that not only reduces emissions, but also guarantees dignified lives. For us, climate justice is the necessary framework for understanding and acting, the framework for achieving a triple transition, climate transition, social transition, and economic transition. It is not only enough to reduce emissions and to appeal to the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, implying that responsible countries can continue to destabilize the planetary system on the condition of paying for the damage caused. It is essential to transform the power relations that have placed global south countries, vulnerable communities, young people, and the future generations on the front line of this crisis, while global north countries, oil and gas exporting countries, large fossil fuel corporations, and economic elites continue to profit from the destruction of the planet. This system change implies historical reparation, deepening the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, and with a decolonialist and intergenerational approach that involves and prioritizes a global redistribution of resources. And finally, in addition to a history last decade for youth mobilization against the climate crisis, we are in 2025 in a historic moment in which the International Court of Justice, after 6 years of fight from young people in its advisory opinion on the 23rd of July 2025 on the obligations of states in relation to climate change, determined that the lack of ambition and effective climate action by states can constitute a violation of their human rights obligations. This includes, as we discussed earlier, the right to life, the right to health, and the right to a healthy, clean, and sustainable environment. This unprecedented ruling is establishing a fundamental framework to demand accountability from governments and large polluting companies, and equips citizens, young people, and civil society with a very powerful legal instrument to defend their rights in the face of climate crisis. And this is generating, as our panelists will be mentioning today, unprecedented cases in the field of justice at all levels, in the national courts, for example, in Pakistan, in Switzerland, in Latin America, in the Inter-American Court, or in the European Court of Human Rights. The advisory opinion is a compass, which we use as a framework to demand more action. What we are asking is coherence with the scientific evidence and with the human rights framework. The International Court of Justice has already said that climate inaction can violate human rights, and continuing to authorize fossil fuel projects or not allocating the necessary resources for urgent adaptation moves us away from commitments, and according to the court's logic, increases the risk of incurring in these human rights violations. So with this, I would like to close this opening speech at the opening event of the Spanish Pavilion by stating that we will contribute to defend that there cannot be climate justice without real youth participation, without funding for associations so that youth movements can research, can propose, and can monitor independently, without climate education, without demanding action and defending our rights through climate justice, and without permanent dialogue structures between youth and the government. With the United Nations Climate Change Conference just kicking off, we are facing a historic opportunity for the mobilization of resources globally and to defend a just transition that leaves no one behind. So now I would like to give you the floor, Pablo, who will be moderating this panel session on how young people are transforming climate justice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to be here. Thank you to be here. We are waiting for 2 more speakers, but we are gonna start. And they have some problem with the traffic, I think. So yeah, as you can imagine, 10 p.m., second day of the COP, it's not that easy to organize an event in a pavilion. So we are here and we are going to start. Apparently, like a Spanish weather in summer, so we can do it shortly and we can start in a more informal way. So if you have any questions or we can have like an informal debate here at the end, will be more useful. I would like to present our speakers. I'm so proud that you're here because you have a big career, large career. So I will say some details of your CVs and then you can say more if you want. So Amanda, you came from Brazil. You have a large experience with international events representing your country in the Y20, also G20 events. So I think your experience is super important in this panel, and we really appreciate your presence here.
Thank you very much. It's on. It's a pleasure to be here in the Spain Pavilion because I believe international relations, it's about relations. So that's what we are building here. And for Brazil, it's so important because we are host this important event in Amazonia. It's not easy, it's hard, but for the world, it's important to have the voice of the local people to debate the future with everybody.
Thank you so much. And Samoira, you came from Mayotte Island, French island. Yeah. And you are a law activist. You have been part of World Youth for Climate Activists, that you make like an unprecedented history law case for the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice. So yes, a privilege that you are here for sure. So if you want to say something about yourself.
Thank you for the kind introduction. Indeed, I'm from French overseas territories that is called Mayotte, which is just next to Madagascar. Nobody generally knows about it, but it's an island that has been facing climate change and that is facing the consequences of it heavily. So that has led to my activism personally. And since 2021, I've been involved with the World Youth for Climate Justice, which is basically one of the organizations that has been pushing for the ruling at the International Court of Justice on Climate. And this year, after, as was mentioned by our great keynote speaker, we finally are coming here to COP with that advisory opinion in hand. That is, I can go into the details more after for the conversation, but that is giving us a lot of elements to be able to contribute in the negotiations in a meaningful way. But yeah, I can touch upon that a bit later.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, what we see is like young people is using different ways to push the institution, like in a more institutional or political way, and a more judicial or law ways to continue pushing the institution, the politicians for ambition in climate change. So Amanda, I would like to ask you about which are the main strategics or also the main problems that you have to engage to do your activism as in an institutional way. Yeah.
Thank you. Here in Brazil, we have a lot of experience with youth movement, like student movement in Brazil and Latin America. So it's not about the education, but how the students and the scientific students can build and promote a new perspective. So Brazil, it's a huge democracy. Nowadays, we have a poly-crisis, we have a climate change crisis, but we have a crisis of democracy, international law, multilateralism. And the students and the youth in Brazil, we are trying to have some impact in politics, a high level like COP30, G20, BRICS, and other important space. It's not easy work, but for the youth, we believe we have the capacity to have a strong voice in the street, because we do that here in Brazil. We have a huge capacity of mobilize it, but have the capacity to express technical debates like climate change, and it's so important for us. It's important to understand the debate of economy of the countries like Brazil, South America, because for the youth, it's not about change the world, but have more green jobs, have more experience in scientific work, or more opportunities just to study, because this is about human rights. It's not just think what we are live in a new world, but what we are living now. I don't know if I have a time. Okay.
Okay. So if you want to add something more, or it's okay.
After.
Okay, okay. I will come back to you. So Samaria, you I think make an unprecedented history law case with the advisory opinion, but we have seen many other cases all around the world, like the case of young people in Montana against the Montana state. Also, we see many cases in South America, like Mecheros against Ecuador state, future generations against Colombia state. Also in Europe, we have Duarte Agostino, the Portuguese group of students who demands 33 states from the Council of Europe. So we are seeing in the last few years like a revolution in the courts. So I would like to ask you about this revolution, why it's happened, and yeah, was the big arguments that the student and the young people are using to push their state at courts?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Generally, what we see with those climate cases that are happening all across the board is that they are born from a deep frustration from the consequences of climate change that we are already facing, and the lack of political willingness to do what is necessary to curb the line of climate change advancing. And youth in particular we know that the world that we're living right now is going to change rapidly, and that the consequences that we're going to face are going to be extremely hard. We're already seeing it. So we are also seeing a lot of those cases happening. And what is interesting actually with those youth cases is that they use a lot of human rights compelling arguments. They not only talk about the notion of the morality of the law, that the actions of states are not moral, but they also talk about the need for ambition, and they use human rights argument to advance a lot their positioning. We're seeing arguments around the right to life, the right to water, the right to livelihood, and also more and more we've been seeing, because the right to healthy environment movement has been becoming more powerful, we're also seeing some of those elements. And an interesting segue for me for that, talking about the advisory opinions, that it's going to facilitate those kind of strategic litigation, because it speaks clearly on the obligations of states. It's mentioned the fact that states have an obligation to curb the limit of global warming to 1.5, and that is the red line that has been set by the courts, not only by the court, but it has been said by the state themselves through the Paris Agreement. It also mentioned the fact that human rights is an important factor to take into account. So those human rights litigation cases are going to appear more and more. We know that right now already, we are seeing cases happening that are emerging across the world that are using those arguments. For example, there is the Odette case in the Philippines, which is suing a company in Germany. So we are seeing that they are using human rights arguments that are based from the advisory opinion. We're also seeing cases of we're also seeing that the advisory opinion has been really clear on the importance of the UNFCCC, that it has an obligation to mitigate, we have a state have obligation to mitigate, adapt, but also cooperate together to make sure that we are preventing harm to the climate system. And that means also using their NDC in a way that is, and that is making sure that the NDC, when they're all put together, that we're actually doing the objective of curving the line. And not doing that is a breach of their obligation internationally. And the breach of their obligation internally, we are seeing that that can lead to legal consequences, such in form of reparation that are necessary. If complainants are able to prove causation, that reparation could mean form of compensation, basically monetary compensation, restitution, so that means bringing it back to the way it was, or satisfaction, which are more non-financial ways of repairing. That could be a form of apology, an acknowledgement that is discussed with the local community that has been affected. So we're seeing that the advisory opinion is now already giving pathway for strategic litigation to happen internationally. I gave the notion of the audit case, but even here in Brazil, there was, it was brought out in a case that went to the High Court, but then after that was dismissed. There are a lot of pregnant also in a case also in the South Africa was brought also. So we're seeing a lot of movement right now using the advisory opinion.
Great. And Amanda, in this way, I will ask you about this state obligation to hear the young people, to give spaces. So how do you feel these spaces are evolving? Like, do you think when you are sitting at the desk, you have the power to negotiate, or is just youth people sitting there?
For Brazil, it depends a lot the kind of the politics, the presidents. Nowadays in Brazil, we have an open dialogue with the government. We have this capacity of advocacy. It's really strong, this way to put pressure on the street with a student movement, social movement, and have a capacity of advocacy in the government, Congress. But democracy is not easy, and Brazil we had a democracy crisis with the government of Bolsonaro, because Bolsonaro was denial of science, denial of democracy, and denial of human rights. And this is important because nowadays in the world we have some Bolsonaros, and this will impact the future of the youth. It's a hard moment. In South Africa, with the Youth 20 this year, we had the consensus for the communique for the youth. We had a lot of problems. It's not easy to have a consensus with a lot of countries and different youth, but for the first step, we need to understand we have a crisis. What we will do. Last year in Brazil, we worked in the G20 and the Youth 20, and was hard too, because it's different, the point of view of the youth, it's different, the point of view of the country, but we did, because we believed in the process. And the democracy process, it's really, really important. We can change the president, we can change the politics, but this step of the democracy is so important. And for us in Brazil, science is important too. We had a crisis with a pandemic time. It was sad for us in Latin America, in Brazil, because we didn't have access a vaccine. This is about science. If we will have a strong pandemic in my country or other country, it's different if the country have access finance of a bank for the health system, or access a scientific level to change the situation. So it's important to, in moment of crisis, defend the institutions like science, universities, democracy, because it's not easy time, and these years in South Africa was really, really sad. We didn't have a consensus in the youth. And if we don't have a consensus in the youth level, it's hard to have a consensus in the diplomacy level.
For sure, thank you. And I will make the last question before the public die because of the temperature. So after this question, you can make some questions because I think we are in a more informal space. So Samira, what next? We have the advisory opinion right now that was published on summer, I think. Yeah, so what are the next steps with this advisory opinion and how the young people can use it for go further with that?
Thank you for that question. The good thing with advisory opinion is that whether state wants or not, because right now we're seeing that the advisory opinion is actually so good that the polluting state are actually afraid of it. They're trying to discredit it, to put it aside, because it says clearly what we already know on what state must do and how fast they must act. And because of that, they're trying to put it aside. So I think right now what is next is that we must make sure that we are using it actively. For example, for us, we came here at COP with my organization and we're trying to give negotiator trainings on how to use the advisory opinion in the negotiation room, because it goes so much into the depth on what is expected of states in terms of like the national determined contribution and how they must be fit for purpose and how they must be science-based. Another element outside maybe of the negotiation room is that other advisory opinions by the International Court of Justice have been recognized by the UN General Assembly, and they have been welcomed by it. But right now, that conversation to try to recognize it has been quite difficult. So it's try also to support the efforts toward going towards recognizing that advisory opinion to cement it within the UN framework in general. And also on the training of it, my organization is also trying to make sure we have like different fronts all across the globe, from Europe to Asia to Africa, Caribbean, Latin America, and Pacific. We're trying to make sure that youth are trained on how to use this advisory opinion not only regionally but also nationally, and how they can make use of it for their campaigning, because it touches upon almost all of topic related to climate, and if needed, if we need to go there, towards strategic litigation. So trying to form yourself on how to be able to use it for your own work is important, so that you can actually make sure that you can hold state accountable. And I think that is the first basis to start being cemented in the UN system so that it cannot be ignored by states, and then using it to change policies, and if needed, going to the courts. And what we're also trying to do, apart from training for youth, is that we are approaching judges and to train them on what the court has said, because judges are the other ones who are going to be faced with all of those climate laws that are incoming to them, and they need to be able to understand that ruling so that they can deliver when the state tells us what is actually needed.
Thank you so much. So we open the floor for any person who is in the public who want to ask something. And yeah, if you have any question for our speakers, it's the time. Please.
Hi everyone, my name is Nela. I am from Consciousness Safe Soil Movement. So we're trying to raise awareness around the critical issue of soil degradation and desertification. So I come from Safe Soil Movement. I'm from Spain originally. So yeah, I think all Spanish people will agree that Spain is facing like really serious climate threats in relation to the loss of world agricultural soils. So I guess my question for all of you is, what does soil mean to you? soil, just like, you know, the world soil, and why is it important? And why not enough young people are thinking about soil when we think about climate action and climate change, when soil is actually one of the biggest carbon sinks and one of the biggest resources we can use for mitigation. So thank you.
If I understood correctly, the question was on oil, right? Soil? Soil, okay. Sorry, I didn't understand. And what that means for me?
Okay, okay, because I didn't catch it.
I can't hear really well, I'm sorry.
It's like we didn't understand the question, actually.
Okay, but I think you need to talk like really close to the mic better, maybe.
If you can.
Yes. See? And maybe come a little bit here.
Good.
Works now? Okay.
Yeah.
Is it fine? Thank you so much. I'll introduce myself quickly again. I'm Nela, originally from Spain. I am representing the Save Soil movement. It's a global movement to raise awareness around the critical issue of soil degradation and desertification. And of course, Spain is facing really serious damages in challenges related to this. I mean, this past summer, we had one of the craziest wildfires that has completely burned down a lot of agricultural soil. So I guess my question as a young person is, I find that, you know, usually in these climate discussions and young people, especially in relating to climate change, they don't always necessarily know that soil is such a big resource that we can use to mitigate many of the challenges of climate change. So we can actually, you know, transition towards regenerative farming practices and make this as a standard, both nationally, but also, you know, as a global movement, we're also trying to push and collaborate with UN bodies for this. So I guess my question is, I am sure that in your countries, you're also facing these issues. And yeah, a very simple question, like why do young people don't necessarily know a lot about this, and how could we try to focus the narrative to put the highlight on soil, because it is ultimately a wonderful strategy to mitigate climate change. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I will try to answer it, even if I'm not, I must say, a soil expert. Um, to be honest, I think it has a lot to do with the climate information that we receive. I think that us working in the climate space, when we think about mitigation solution, we generally think about solutions that are told to us by the IPCC, and we talk about also the impact of agriculture, which is a big part of it. But it's true that the matter of soil is not one that we are completely told on, even if we are already seeing the consequences of it. I know that you talk about Spain, but I can also talk about my island, where drought is one of the really big elements of climate that we're facing, and where the issue also of agriculture and dependence to external exports is also something that we're facing. So trying to have more conversation on that, on the mitigation stream, is definitely something that should be pushed for the NDC. So I agree with that.
Sorry. Thank you for answering the question. I have to interrupt the question one moment because we finally have our next speaker. So I think that you finally came after a traffic problem, but here you are. And Mariana, I want to introduce you as one of the more active lawyer in Portugal. You have been active leadership in important court cases. So please tell us about your experience. We already talked about some important cases in the world, like Duarte Agostino, and also the advisory opinion. But please tell us what is climate litigation, what that means, and why it's so important.
Okay, thank you very much. Are you listening? Yeah. I'm so sorry for the delay. I had an
Sorry, put it closer.
closer. Okay. So yeah, I'm a climate litigator. I have an NGO that today is the largest youth-led climate litigation NGO in the world. I'm currently managing 170 cases, most of them in Portugal. We also started the first climate case in the history of Portugal. We opened the courts to climate change. And actually, we are now collaborating with GLAN, Global Legal Action Network, to bring Duarte Agostino case to the National Court, as last year was not very successful, the case. So for me, the law is one of the most powerful tools we have, as if you look at the house of the status quo, you will see that the law is one of the pillars that is sustaining, well, our economic system, our political system. These scopes, like everything is law, to be honest. So when I was a law student in Portugal, I was wondering why no one is using the law in my country. Why are polluters getting away with everything that they do? And if I'm looking to my state and my state is not doing enough, why they are not being held accountable? And that question kept on my mind. I was already a climate activist. I started with Fridays for Future when I was 16. I organized one of the first climate strikes in Portugal. And during 4 years, I was grassroots collectives. I was working with people on the street. But then I was like, no, I need to do something with my law degree. So I founded this NGO. And till today, I've seen how climate litigation really shakes the system and how we can prevent damage, how we can help communities. That's something we also do. We help communities with legal support. And in the way, I also found out that climate change is not the only crisis we are facing. We are facing a huge crisis of our democracies and a huge crisis of erosion of rule of law. People don't believe anymore that the current system is going to deliver according to their needs. So we have to make sure that we bring the courts to the table and they actually give an impartial decision on what is going on. I would love to tell you more about, well, these 170 legal actions that we are doing, but we don't have much time. Yeah, I think that's my 2 cents on this topic.
Thank you so much for your approach. We were asking the public because I'm worried if any of our public assistants die because of the temperature. So yes, if you have any more question about this specific topic, like climate litigation, but as well the rule of law and how we are facing with that, please go ahead and take the floor.
First of all, thanks to all the speakers. I have 2 questions. So, Samira, I wanted to know more about your involvement in this ICG rule case. Like maybe you can give us your impressions and, I don't know, like more like on experience level. And then Mariana was also like, I think also like experience, but maybe choose one case of climate litigation that really like, I don't know, like if it was difficult or that, I don't know, it really stayed with you. Maybe the first, maybe just, I don't know. Thank you.
Yes, sorry, I'm bad at speaking about myself, so I don't really generally do it. But yeah, as I was mentioning, I was involved since 2021 in this advisory opinion campaign. And this advisory opinion campaign, I got involved with it because I met Pacific students who were the one who started the campaign um, and who started it in 2019 and who were telling me about what they were facing in their island that was extremely similar to what I was seeing in mine. They were telling me about stories of extreme weather events. They were telling me about story about how they are seeing the sea level rise and how year by year the land is disappearing to the sea. They are telling me story about ocean acidification and how that impacts their fishermen and how that impacts their livelihood as it impacts corals around it. And I could see it so much in my own experience and the small changes that I was seeing until the accumulation of the change that I seen was the cyclone that happened last year in December 2024, 14 December 2024 in Mayotte, where a cyclone destroyed the almost whole infrastructure of my island. And that was a cyclone that was caused partially, that was amplified by climate change. And we were not ready, and that has completely traumatized me and keep on trying to push me for that. So that experiences of seeing the change happen from a personal perspective, plus the deep frustration that I have in seeing that we're being put aside, we know what we must do, it's so urgent, we only have a small time gap to make rapid decrease of greenhouse gas emission. Otherwise, the consequences that we're going to face, we don't even know what they're going to be actually. We have like speculation, we have all of those trajectories, but we don't know what that means. But what we know for territories like us, like in Mayotte, is that we're going to disappear, is that we're going to lose our tradition, we're going to lose our culture, and we're going to completely be put aside. So that leading to the advisory opinion campaign was a campaign that was really pushed forward by islands and youth who are feeling the same deep frustration within their bones and who are trying to, we first needed to go to the UN General Assembly to get a resolution voted to go after that to the International Court of Justice. So that meant convincing half of the state of the UN to vote for that resolution. And that was where our youth campaigner came into play, and we really tried to talk as much as possible. But me, being a citizen of France, even if I'm from Mayotte, sometimes those conversations with the French government were not maybe as successful as what I wanted. And also being able to go to talk with states and tell them about the argument that they must bring forward to the International Court of Justice. All of that culminated to the proceeding being oral in front of the court, where we have seen also you there, and then the delivery back in July. So that was a hard journey because it meant every day being in face of the impending crisis that we're living, but it also was extremely rewarding because it started from the bottom, and then going to that highest court and having all of those states speak about what must actually happen. So yeah, that's a bit of my personal experience.
Thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, Mariana, go ahead.
Okay, so it's actually interesting that in my last month I've been studying a lot the ICG advisory opinion because of another action that we are going to launch in next month. That is going to be one of the first climate cases integrating the ICG, so I hope that works. But the first case of Portugal was for me like the most special for sure. So you all know that we have the Paris Agreement, but the Paris Agreement doesn't work for itself, so the countries need to translate the international agreement into national law. And that's what's been happening with the things that we call climate acts. So Portugal did approve a climate act in 2021 with lots of deadlines and plans that most of them right now they are completely overdue, and we're not going to reach the 55% targets by 2030 because of that. So when this was being discussed, this climate law, I was in the parliament telling the deputies, this is not going to work, the law is not ambitious enough, but still the law was approved, and that was a huge victory around the world because it was one of the first climate acts that we had. And I was like, cool, we have a climate act, so let's see. The first deadline was passed, then the second, the third, the fourth, and I was like, no, that's enough. That's really enough. I talked with all the parties in the assembly, and I told them why this is not happening. Like, why are you ignoring that we have this law? And they said, it's just a matter of political will, to be honest. We have the law, so of course we can do it. And I was like, this is really weird. Like, they are telling me that this is a matter of political will. And I also remember that, so I'm the youngest advisor to the president of Portugal. And I remember I had a meeting with him and I said, you know, they're not complying with the Climate Act, so I think I'm going to sue the state. And he said, that's amazing, that's democracy working. And I was like, okay, now I have the president saying that to me, so I'm going to proceed. So that's what happened. Like, we sued the Portuguese state for non-compliance with the Climate Act. This is actually one of the easiest climate litigations that we can do with our countries. But this was very hard because this was the first climate case, which means that the courts never saw this before. The courts never had to rule on climate change before. So what the judge did, her strategy was to delay the case. And I was like, no, this cannot happen. We are in a climate crisis, you have to rule it fast. So we made a complaint of the judge. I gave an interview to the biggest newspaper of the country. Next day she was ruling the case. But she was ruling the case saying, we have separations of power. I'm sorry, I cannot rule on climate change. And I was like, no, of course you can. So we went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court gave us our first victory and said, yes, we can rule on climate change. We are not violating the separations of power because we are ruling climate change. It's our duty. And now we are waiting for the decision. I don't know how this will end, but one thing for sure is that we open the doors to climate change in Portugal. So this is really one of the most special cases for me, as it was also my first case. Yeah.
Amazing, yeah. I think we don't have enough time for more questions, so I will ask for a short conclusion, so we can start with you.
Thank you. I was thinking, what is justice for the youth in Latin America? And justice is talk about the truth. And for Latin America youth and the students to have rights like access a health, access a university, it's the justice what we need to talk. It's really hard to have the connection of technical debate and the reality of the youth. But I was thinking the flooding, what happened in Valencia, happened in Porto Alegre, in Brazil. So it's easy to understand what is the problem of the youth of the Spain, because it's the same for us here in Brazil, because we are with the same problem, climate change. But how to fix that with a different level of capacity is different, Brazil than North and global North. For us in Amazonia, we need to talk about the reality of the youth. And the reality of the youth here is to have rights and access, some things that it's normal for a European youth. I'm here represent the youth of Brazil, but I worked a lot for OCLAI. Here we have two representatives of OCLAI and students Kunas from Panama. And we need to ask for students Kuna and use the technical debate to put the voice of the indigenous in the process. I guess this is my work, to have the access of political roots with a high level of debate. And the climate mitigations, the negotiation of diplomatic staff, it's really, really important, but we need to put the voice of the reality of the youth in this paper.
Thank you. So, Samira, a short conclusion.
Yes, I think I've said already a lot of what I was thinking, so I'll already keep it short and sweet. The only thing that I want people in this room to go out with is the fact that states have obligation toward us. States have obligation toward us, and if they do not respect those obligations, then we have the right to hold them accountable. And if that means going to the courts, then go to the courts.
Okay, so if you're not a lawyer but you are a climate activist, I think that climate litigation is a little bit scary, but that's why organizations like mine were founded. We're actually in the process of opening offices in the United States and here in South America to be able to help more communities and to engage and expand climate litigation. And one thing that I want to finalize is there's also lots of people that don't find it scary because they don't know how to do it. They find it scary because they think this is like, I don't know, too radical sometimes. But one thing that I've been saying is climate litigation, we are not inventing anything. The laws are already there, right? So when we go to the courts, we actually we're making a favor to our government, to our politicians. We are really making them a favor to make sure that the laws are being complied with. Because when laws are complied with, when you have a strong democracy, your people are happy, right? So this is also about happiness, I think, in the end of the day.
Well, yeah. Thank you so much for your participation. And also to this public who stay here even with these conditions. And also the speakers, you have such important vision from very, very different perspective, but was super important to put it all together. So thank you very much for your participation. I'm super glad.